A trained accountant by profession, Bhupen Khakhar began practicing art only in his late 20s after moving from Bombay to Baroda in 1962, where he enrolled at the Maharaja Sayaji Rao University of Fine Arts. He immersed himself in the city's thriving artistic and intellectual community and considered artists Ghulam Muhammad Sheikh, Nalini Malani, Vivan Sundaram, and critic and art historian Geeta Kapoor as close friends. Conscious of his lack of formal training in art, Khakhar began studying painting and pictorial techniques and arrived at an artistic style that referenced both high and low culture. His influences included the works of Henry Rousseau and David Hockney, Sienese art, Indian miniature paintings, the oleographs of the bazaar, and urban Indian iconography. He was also introduced to British pop art by artist Jim Donovan in the 1960s. Alongside contemporaries Sheikh and Sundaram, Khakhar went on to play a significant role in the new wave of narrative and figurative painting that emerged from the Baroda School of Painting. His oeuvre was fueled by an interest in human nature and the lives of ordinary men, whom he often depicted in their natural or occupational environment, such as in his Tradesman series, which he started in the 1970s. He also immortalized members of his wide social circle in his works. The subject of the present lot is veteran architect Karan Grover, a friend and patron of Khakhar, portrayed against the backdrop of Champaner, a UNESCO World Heritage Site about 50 kilometers from Baroda. Dating back to the 15th century, Champaner is among the few medieval heritage sites in India with specimens of both Islamic and Hindu architecture. Grover was first introduced to the site by his professor at MSU, R.N. Mehta, who had spent 30 years excavating the buried city and has been instrumental in its restoration and conservation through his NGO, the Heritage Trust. Painted in 1996, less than a decade before the artist's death, the present lot is a fine example of Khakhar's mature work and exhibits stylistic choices typical of works from this decade. As artist and writer Timothy Hyman notes, though the bright blues and pinks of the previous years are more muted in this painting, they recall both the saturated color palette of Sienese paintings of the 13th to 15th centuries and the chemical impurity of modern Indian decor. By this period, the artist's works had grown in their scale and complexity. Though he rejected the idea of form, Khakhar used space in innovative ways. Usha Michandani observes in his later works, such as this one, he enables us to almost walk through his paintings. He also sensitively balances the public and the private, openness and intimacy in his composition. Grover appears here as a larger-than-life figure in the bottom left of the frame. And yet his gaze is averted and his stance remains slightly awkward, a device Khakhar often used to convey vulnerability in his male figures. In the backdrop is Khakhar's interpretation of the Champaner landscape. Shadowy, featureless men gather in pockets of the undulating landscape, in a narrative composition reminiscent of Indian miniature paintings. If you look closely, you'll see a man with white hair, much like the artist's own, near Grover's right shoulder. This semi-autobiographical character appears in many of Khakhar's works of the 80s and 90s, likely an act of self-assertion after his own coming out as a gay man following a visit to England in 1979. According to Hyman, he also associated this particular type of landscape, set against a water body surrounded by lush vegetation, as a symbolic means of exploring his sexuality. As this painting proves, Khakhar is remembered not just for his unabashed love of kitsch and performance, but also a rare honesty and openness that permeates his art. Bid on this work and other significant lots by India's leading modernists at Saffronart's Spring Live Auction in Mumbai on 13th March 2024, followed by the Spring Online Auction on 13th and 14th March 2024.